I found out about the affair while elbow-deep in garbage water. It was 2:13 a.m. The house was asleep, except for me, cursing under the kitchen sink because the damn trap pipe cracked and the drip had soaked through the cabinet. I'd spent my Saturday night swearing at copper fittings and praying not to flood the floor. That's when her phone buzzed on the counter behind me. Once, twice, then a third time, each one louder than the last. I'm not a snooper, never have been, but 3 can't wait to see you messages from R. In under an hour? That's not paranoia. That's a neon sign. So I stood up, wiped my hands on the rag, and tapped the screen. There were no nudes, no explicit confessions, just chemistry, familiarity, intimacy, a stream of playful jabs, inside jokes, pet names. It was the ease that gutted me, not the intimacy, not even the betrayal. It was how effortless she sounded with him, like I had become the second life. The oldest message I saw? 6 months ago. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I just sat on the kitchen stool, garbage water on my jeans, reading messages like I was flipping through someone else's photo album. I saw my own life's obituary written in emojis and hotel check-ins. That moment didn't break me, calcified something inside me. You know what's funny? Over 97% of the people who hear this story never subscribe. Wild, right? But every single one of you makes it possible for stories like this to get told. So if you're still with me, do what my ex never did. Show some loyalty. Hit that button. It means more than you think. Anyway, she kissed me goodnight 2 hours earlier. Said she was exhausted. Kissed me soft, like nothing was wrong. Her toothbrush was still wet. She was even wearing the t-shirt I got her from our New Orleans trip. That t-shirt had more loyalty than she did. I went back upstairs around 3 a.m. She was dead asleep, face down, snoring lightly, one leg draped over the comforter. I stood at the foot of the bed and just watched her. Not in some creepy way. More like a scientist watching an animal that had just chewed through the wires of its own cage. She stretched in her sleep and muttered something, probably dreaming about him. About our Ryan. That was his name. I'd seen his full name on a reservation email buried between her texts. Ryan Langley. God, even his name sounded like a cologne ad. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't rage either. I went back to the kitchen, cleaned the mess, and fixed the leak. Then I opened my laptop and typed his name into every engine I knew. Ryan Langley. Founder. Angel investor. Co-owner of some boutique fitness thing that sold overpriced supplements to 30-somethings who needed to feel edgy in their midlife crises. He smiled like a guy who'd never been punched in the face for something he said. There was one thing I saw in his photos, Instagram, LinkedIn, conference pages that made me stop scrolling. A ring. Thin. Gold. Always on his left hand. He was married. Suddenly, I wasn't just the sucker in this circus. I was part of a pattern. A web. She wasn't his new life. She was his escape hatch. And somewhere out there, his wife had no idea she was about to become me. Unless she already was. It's a strange kind of clarity, realizing your pain isn't unique. It's just your turn. But I wasn't going to be the quiet, shattered husband sobbing into whiskey. That's not who I am. I just needed to meet her, Ryan's wife, whoever she was. I needed to look into the eyes of the only other person in the world who might understand what was coming. And I had no idea what that meeting would spark. The next morning, she came downstairs in leggings and a loose sweater, mug in hand, humming like she'd slept through world peace. I was making eggs because that's what you do when you find out your marriage is a staged production. You make eggs and wait for the next act. She leaned against the counter and said it casually, like it was already decided. I need a little space, just a solo weekend. Me some wine, a quiet view. You know, to clear my head. I turned off the burner and looked at her like she was offering me a brochure. Yeah, I said. You picked a place yet? She smiled. That rehearsed? God, I'm so good at this smile. Somewhere in the Berkshires. Spa maybe. Just need to turn off for a bit. I nodded. You want me to pack your charger? Her smile faltered for half a second. Just long enough to notice. Sure, she said, recovering. Thanks, babe. I handed her the charger, folded, neatly coiled. Then I poured her coffee into a to-go thermos and kissed her on the cheek like a husband who still believed in the script. She left an hour later. Car cleaned out, yoga mat in the back, playlist already queued. Said she'd call that night. Said she loved me. The front door clicked shut at 9:17 a.m. By 9:19 I was at my laptop. Ryan Langley. I'd done a basic scan the night before, but now I dug deeper. Business listings, property records, transaction networks. The guy wasn't exactly subtle. When you think you're bulletproof, you get sloppy. He owned a few gyms, some nutrition crap brand, and a holding company with a name so generic it practically screamed shell account. R&L Ventures, LLC. The real gift came when I logged into our joint credit card account. See, she never bothered getting her own. Said we should keep it simple. Her simplicity was my access. On Thursday, 2 days before her solo retreat, she'd purchased a gift card for a boutique hotel 2 towns over. The kind of place with clawfoot tubs and wood-burning fireplaces in every suite. The confirmation email was still sitting there in plain sight. Room booked. 2 nights. In her name, but with Ryan's card as the second guest. I checked the rewards section, tracked down the hotel chain, pulled their app, logged in using her credentials. She used the same password for everything. I'd helped her set it. Boom. There it was. A reservation at the Briarstone Inn. Deluxe suite. 2 adults. Confirmed. I clicked back into our bank activity. Last weekend, she'd used Lyft to get home from the farmer's market. Except the drop-off location was a bar 12 minutes from Ryan's office. I pulled the receipt. Ride started near the airport. We live nowhere near the airport. Oh, and that wine bar she stumbled into with her friends after yoga last Wednesday? She checked in there on Yelp. So had he. Same window of time. Same server name on the receipt. She wasn't even creative. Just confident I'd never check. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, then opened a second tab and started a spreadsheet. I labeled it Truth. Dumb name, but I wasn't writing poetry. I input everything: dates, times, names, charges. I highlighted overlaps, drew connections, color-coded inconsistencies. I wasn't building a case for a courtroom. I was building one for myself. To stay sane, to stay steady. At around 3 p.m., I looked out the window and saw the leaves twitching in the wind, and I realized something. I hadn't cried. Not once. Not when I saw the texts. Not when she lied to my face. Not even when I realized she was with him right now. My pulse was calm. My breathing even. What I felt wasn't pain anymore. It was focus. And something else. A sense that I was no longer alone in this. Because if this man had a wife and he did, that ring was no prop, then she might already be watching. She might already know. And if she didn't, then I was going to find her. And introduce myself. I parked across from the gym at 9:32 a.m. Engine off, sunglasses on, watching the front entrance like it owed me money. Ryan's boutique gym was a smug little glass and brick box wedged between a vegan bakery and a microbrewery, the kind of place that sold $200 hoodies and promised enlightenment through kettlebells. It was the only gym in town my wife would drive 20 minutes out of her way for. She said it felt more intentional, whatever that meant. I knew Sunday morning was his ritual. His calendar, yes, he had one public enough to view, said, Team Core Flow plus coffee, from 8:30 to 10 every Sunday. Cute. At 9:47 a.m., a matte black Tesla pulled into the side lot. Same one from his business profile pics. Ryan stepped out first, tall, tanned, the kind of guy who uses the word synergy without irony. He looked like someone who moisturized before workouts. His shirt clung like it was stitched on. Then she stepped out. No ring. Hair tied back. Casual but not careless. The kind of woman who knows exactly how to present herself in every room, even if that room is a parking lot outside a sanctimonious gym. She didn't smile, didn't stretch, didn't fidget. She scanned the lot once, slowly, not looking for a parking spot, looking for a problem. That's when I knew. She wasn't just some oblivious spouse. She was aware, maybe not of me, but of something. Ryan kissed her cheek like it was a script. She barely tilted her head. Then she said something brief, clipped, and he turned toward the gym. She stayed by the car, and I got out. She saw me coming and didn't flinch, just watched, arms crossed, lips pursed, ready for either small talk or war. I stopped about 5 feet away, close enough to be intentional, far enough to be polite. You're Julia, I said. Her eyes flickered, just a flash, then stillness. And you're Adam, she replied. No question mark. We stood in silence for a beat, the kind of silence you only get between two people who've just found themselves on the same side of a battlefield. I wasn't sure you'd find me, she said. I wasn't sure you were real, I said back. She almost smiled. Almost. He leaves his phone on Bluetooth when he gets in the car. she said. Last week I heard your wife's voice through the speakers. She said, "Next time, my place." That helped narrow it down. I exhaled, long and quiet. "So we've both been doing recon," I said. She nodded. "I've been tracking this for 3 months. I just found out 3 nights ago." She raised an eyebrow. "And you're here already? That's fast." Fixing a leak led to curiosity. "Curiosity," she repeated. "That's a nice word for it." We stood there another moment, both of us caught in this weird gravitational field where neither of us wanted to be the first to break eye contact. "Do you want to sit down somewhere?" I asked. "Not here," she said, already walking toward her car. "Follow me. There's a place with real coffee and tables that don't wobble." She didn't ask if I had time. She didn't need to. People like us, people caught in the crossfire, we make time. As I followed her taillights down the street, a strange thing happened. I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel humiliation. I felt a shift, like something fragile had cracked open, and underneath there was steel. She wasn't unraveling. She wasn't sobbing into tissues or planning to forgive him with therapy coupons. And if she wasn't falling apart, then neither was I. The cafe was a sterile little spot near the library, one of those post-industrial joints with brushed steel tables, mood lighting set to existential dread, and coffee strong enough to insult you in 3 languages. No soft music. No kids. No distractions. Just a place for people who needed caffeine and didn't want to make eye contact. Julia was already seated when I walked in. Window seat, back to the wall. Laptop open, cords out, notebook to the left. Pen exactly aligned like a surgeon prepping for a bypass. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just pointed to the seat across from her like this was a job interview I hadn't applied for. "Black, no sugar," she said as I approached. "How'd you? You look like the kind of man who wants control over at least one thing today." She wasn't wrong. I sat down. She slid a coffee across the table. It was still warm. She'd ordered it for me in advance. Then, without ceremony, she turned the laptop toward me. No preamble. No, "How are you holding up?" Just rows of folders, labeled with timestamps, names, IP logs, screen grabs, bank transfers, property records. A Word doc titled Affair Timeline version 2.5. "Ryan's been careful," she said, "but not as careful as he thinks." I blinked at the screen, then at her. "You've been compiling all this?" "For 92 days, she said. "Since the first time he came home with lavender oil on his collar and told me he'd spilled herbal tea." I looked closer. There were screenshots of Venmo transactions to your wife's yoga studio. Emails. A receipt from a boutique hotel, our boutique hotel, from a weekend I thought she was visiting her sister. Julia tapped her screen. "This one," she said. "He used my card. Forgot to switch back after the gas station." There was no tremor in her voice. No bitterness. She was reading off his sins like itemized deductions. "You're not divorcing him?" I asked. "I will," she said. "But not yet. Divorce is easy. Exposure is better." She pulled out a manila folder and slid it across to me. Inside, a prenuptial agreement with clauses highlighted. One in particular caught my eye. Infidelity linked to reputational harm invalidates his equity claim in shared assets. Clause 9.2, she said. "It's vague on purpose. His lawyer drafted it when Ryan was the one worried I'd be a liability." Funny how fast the script flips. I stared at the folder, unsure if I was supposed to applaud or be terrified. "You want me to do what, exactly?" I asked. "Spy on my wife. Leak screenshots." She sipped her coffee like it bored her. "I want you to help me build redundancy. You've got access to things I don't. Bank data, travel receipts, voicemails, hell, maybe even pillow talk. I'm collecting data. You can provide corroboration. You talk like a litigator." "I'm a behavioral strategist," she said flatly. "I help companies identify risk before it metastasizes." I almost laughed. "So this is what? A project?" "No," she said. "This is containment." There was a pause. I didn't know what to say. Every instinct told me to run, to retreat into grief, to mourn properly and with dignity. But that part of me, the fragile, betrayed husband, was shrinking, fast, because what sat across from me wasn't vengeance. It was precision. "I'm still catching up," I said. "It's been 3 days." Julia leaned forward. Her eyes were ice. "You can cry later, Adam," she said. "You can unravel like he expects. Or you can help me cut the wire before it burns through everything we ever worked for. I nodded slowly. I didn't trust myself to speak. She slid a flash drive across the table. Start with this. It's got everything I've got on your wife so far. Use it or don't. But either way, don't go back to sleep. That phase is over. I took the drive. And somewhere between the bitterness of the coffee and the clarity of her gaze, I realized something. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was going to let it educate me. The first thing Julia told me was to stop thinking like a husband and start thinking like an auditor. Emotion's a liability, she said. They count on it. They build entire exits around the idea that you'll be too wounded to notice where the money went. So I became what she needed, cold, exact, boring. We started with the easy stuff. Joint credit lines, savings accounts, retirement funds. I exported every statement we'd had in the last 2 years into a spreadsheet. Julia color-coded it, created a pivot table, then cross-referenced dates with locations from the data she'd mined off Ryan's GPS pings. My wife, Stephanie, let's stop calling her my wife, because frankly, that title is dead and buried, had a habit of using our card for business dinners on nights she claimed to be doing solo spa stays. Julia flagged everyone. Some were billed to a restaurant 3 cities away. One was a rental tuxedo for an event she swore she never attended. Another was a boutique charge in Miami. Miami. We live in Vermont. It was laughable. I would have laughed, if not for the part where that trip was during our anniversary week. She told me she'd booked a cabin for herself. To reflect. I'd sent her flowers to the fake address she gave. They were returned unopened. I spent the next 3 nights buried in paper trails. Bank logins. Mobile app histories. Old emails I'd once skimmed without suspicion. Julia taught me how to check for microtransfers, those $1 test payments people use when they're linking secret accounts. Stephanie had 2. One went to an unfamiliar online bank. A quick call confirmed a secondary checking account in her name only. Opened 4 months ago. The second was more interesting. I looked deeper and followed a faint trail that linked Ryan to a supposed marketing consulting firm, ArcLight Group. It had a website with stock photos and 3 fake testimonials. No staff bios. No phone number. But payments were being made from one of his gym's accounts to ArcLight every 2 weeks. $5,000, like clockwork. Is this laundering? I asked Julia. No. This is arrogance, she replied. That night, I pulled property records on a plot Ryan had owned in upstate New York. Bought 5 years ago, sold 3 months back quietly. No press release. No celebratory Instagram post. Sold for just under $2.3 million. But the proceeds didn't go to his name. They went to ArcLight Group's operating account. I cross-referenced the LLC's registration. Guess who signed it? His brother-in-law. I'm guessing his wife doesn't know, I told Julia. Oh, she will, she said, smiling like a snake watching a field mouse light a cigarette. She leaned over the screen and tapped the date of the sale. This is what we needed. That's step 1. What's step 2? She closed the laptop. You don't need to know yet. You just need to keep digging. Every lie has a timestamp. Your job is to find them all. I'll say this about betrayal. It changes your moral diet. You stop craving closure. You start craving evidence. So I kept going. Found receipts for wine deliveries to an address I'd never heard of. A condo Stephanie had been paying rent on. Half under her maiden name. Half under a wellness company she'd never registered. Ryan's car had been caught on security footage there twice in June. Julia had the images. I didn't ask how. Everything became a puzzle. Her excuses, his fake invoices, even the playlist she used during yoga sessions started to feel like code. But with every layer I peeled back, I didn't feel more broken. I felt armed, sharper, smarter. I wasn't chasing them anymore. I was following their footprints, and they were the ones being predictable. At one point, Julia looked up from her notes and said, "This doesn't bother you?" "No," I said. "It motivates me." She smirked. "That's what makes you useful." Funny. A month ago, I was begging Stephanie to talk more about our future. Now I was mapping the exact location of where she buried her credibility. And I was just getting started. She walked through the door Sunday evening like she was stepping off a movie set. Hair tousled just enough to look effortless. A canvas weekender bag over her shoulder. An accessory, not luggage. Cheeks flushed from the drive or the guilt or the hotel intimacy. Who knows? She dropped her keys in the dish by the door and said, "Hey babe." like we hadn't both crossed some silent threshold she hoped would never speak. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and the TV on mute. Just background movement. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and roasted garlic. Things she used to associate with comfort. Now they probably smelled like being watched. She stood there in the doorway too long, hesitating, scanning me like she was checking for damage. Or maybe checking if I'd figured it out. I didn't flinch. "How was the solo retreat?" I asked, keeping my tone dry as paper. She smiled, a little too tightly. "Peaceful. I really needed it." I nodded slowly. "That's good. Nothing like some alone time to clear the head." She took a seat across from me and tried to meet my eyes. Couldn't quite do it. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out some stupid artisanal soap. "Thought you'd like this. Smells like cedar and peppercorn." I held it like it was radioactive. "Very masculine. Thanks." She laughed nervously. "You okay?" "I'm great," I said, smiling too. "You look relaxed." That made her uncomfortable. She shifted in her chair. "Listen," she said, eyes flicking down to her lap. "I know I've been kind of distant lately. It's not you. It's just, I don't know. Work, stress, life. You know how it gets." "Sure," I said, sipping my water. "Just distracted, right?" She froze for half a second. Enough for me to enjoy it. Then she exhaled and smiled again. The performance rebooted. "Anyway, I was thinking maybe we could go out for dinner tonight? That Thai place you like. Start fresh." I nodded. "That'd be nice. Let me just change real quick." I stood up and walked upstairs, every step deliberate. In the bedroom, I opened the closet, pulled on a clean shirt, and checked the inside pocket of my jacket. The envelope was still there. Cream-colored, thick paper, not sealed yet. Inside, a letter drafted by Julia's contact. An attorney with a gift for clean language and colder intent. It didn't accuse Stephanie of anything. It didn't make demands. It simply notified her that formal review of shared financial holdings is underway, and all related activity will be considered under preliminary mediation terms, effective immediately. To her, it would look like a pile of polite nothing. But what it actually did was freeze our joint credit access, limit transfer authority, and lock her out of every account she'd been using to fund her wellness fantasy life. And beautifully, because we hadn't technically filed anything yet, she couldn't counter or contest. Any move she made from this moment on would only deepen the paper trail. I slid the envelope into the inside pocket, pressed it flat. Then I smiled at the mirror. Not because I was proud, because I had finally stopped feeling anything. Back downstairs, she was touching up her lip gloss, humming some indie song she thought made her look younger. I grabbed my keys, held the door open, and said, "Ready when you are." During dinner, I asked her how the spa was. She lied. I asked about the view from her room. She invented a cabin with a lake she couldn't name. I asked if she ever just felt like running away. She paused too long before answering, then said, "No, never." With a laugh that didn't quite clear her throat, I paid the bill, left a good tip. On the drive home, she reached across the center console and touched my hand like she was trying to remember how it used to feel. And I let her, because tonight wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about positioning. She thought she still had time, thought she still had the upper hand. But while she was busy playing house, I'd already flipped the table. The first crack didn't come from a courtroom or a confrontation. It came in the form of an email with no name, no greeting, no signature. Just 4 words and a link. Audit. Start with ArcLight. Ryan opened it from his office, probably thinking it was a phishing scam. Probably rolled his eyes, took a bite of his protein bar, clicked anyway. That's what arrogance does. It makes you believe you're untouchable, even when the fuse is already hissing under your chair. Within 48 hours, he was being contacted by a third-party compliance team. Routine verification of holdings, they said, masking what it really was. A quiet preemptive strike from an investor who'd been made just uneasy enough to start sniffing around. Julia hadn't submitted the tip herself. That's the beauty of strategy. You don't need to pull the trigger when someone else is already looking for a reason. Ryan called Julia that afternoon. She let it go to voicemail. Then he called again, and again. 3 missed calls, then a text. "Did you hear something? My lawyer's on edge." She replied, finally, with 2 words, "Everything okay?" He didn't sleep that night. At least, that's what I gathered from the flurry of late-night Slack messages he sent to his COO, his accountant, his brand manager, God help us all, and one especially frantic email at 2:11 a.m. asking, have we ever actually used ArcLight, or is it just a pass-through? Meanwhile, Julia was in a hotel room 2 towns away, sipping mint tea and organizing the next round of asset disclosures like she was curating a playlist. By Friday, the compliance team had questions. Serious ones. About invoices that didn't match services. About double-billed expenses. About asset transfers tied to shell companies that listed no real employees. And then the cherry, the $2.3 million real estate transaction we'd found. The one routed through ArcLight with no board disclosure. The investors were quiet. Too quiet. Then came the prenup. He didn't even know she'd updated it. That's the part that made me grin. Back in 2019, Ryan insisted they update their legal documents for estate purposes. Julia let him have his way. She let him believe it was still his game. Then, quietly, she paid for a second review with her own attorney. Added 3 lines under a new clause titled Protective Conditions. One line read, in the event of verified extramarital activity linked to financial deception or reputational risk, respondent forfeits residual stake in all co-owned partnerships. She never told him. She didn't have to. As long as the document was signed and notarized, and it was binding. And now he was staring at it across a conference table, jaw clenched, as 2 of his own investors asked him when exactly he planned to tell them about the off-ledger entities he was funding through ArcLight. Must be a mistake, he said. But Julia was already in the building. They hadn't told him she'd been invited to the meeting. She simply walked in, calm and sharp in a blazer that probably cost more than my old car. She handed them each a folder. Inside, a forensic breakdown of every ArcLight transaction linked to Ryan's personal spending over the past 12 months. Travel, spa weekends, high-end meals, boutique rentals. Oh, she said lightly. And the payments to the wellness studio in Burlington. I believe you all know the owner's husband now. She nodded to me in the hallway as she left. Ryan never looked up. He called her that night. Left a voicemail that started with, we can still fix this, and ended with, you've destroyed me. She played it on speaker for me while deleting it. No, she said, sipping her tea. You did that. I just arranged the lighting. And that's what the unraveling looks like. Not a storm. Not a meltdown. Just a slow, silent, surgical disassembly of everything he thought would hold. By the time he realized he was drowning, the lifeboat had already sailed. The first red flag probably waved when her banking app wouldn't load. She must have been in the parking lot of her studio, holding her smoothie, half-scrolling, expecting the same digits she always saw. Our shared savings balance, comfortably padded thanks to years of my discipline and her well-timed sighs about needing more breathing room for the business. But that morning her login failed. Twice. Then locked. I can imagine the twitch in her eyebrow, the subtle panic behind the calm exhale. She probably blamed the signal, rebooted her phone, tried again. Still locked. At 9:18 a.m., she walked up to her studio, a space she always described as a healing sanctuary, though lately it had mostly become a tax write-off and a glorified affair staging ground. There was an envelope taped to the front door. Not handwritten, not personal. Typed notice, elegant, minimal. Lease termination notice. Effective immediately. Non-payment of rent. Violation of terms. Access revoked. Locks changed. Please contact property management for retrieval of items. I'd spoken with the landlord 2 days prior. The lease was under my name. Always had been. She never noticed. She was too busy branding the space, painting walls sage green, and quoting Rumi to her clients while billing Downward Dog at $60 an hour. She'd assumed her exit would be clean, that she'd slip out of our marriage like a jacket she'd outgrown. She had Ryan. She had her own studio. She had her curated image of freedom and spiritual realignment. But assumptions are expensive, and she'd just maxed out. She must have tried calling her suppliers next, the herbal tea vendor, the massage oil company, the artisan mat distributor who sent her birthday cards with crystals taped inside. Their lines rang. Some answered, politely informed her that all invoices were flagged. Payments suspended. Credit lines frozen. Julia handled that part. Corporate disruption, she called it. You don't need to take her down. Just interrupt the fantasy. Let gravity do the rest. Around 10 a.m., Stephanie got home. That I know because the Ring camera caught her standing at the mailbox, pulling out a pale gray envelope addressed in embossed serif font. She opened it on the porch. I watched the footage. The first page was a formal letter, signed by my attorney. This letter serves as official notice that the separation clause detailed in the prenup, Section 4, subsection D, has been activated, and all shared financial operations are now under preliminary legal review. Please direct all future inquiries through legal counsel. Further communication will be processed formally. She stared at the paper for a full 26 seconds. Then she reread it. Then she sat down on the porch bench and put her head in her hands. I didn't answer when she called. For times, her voicemails started calm. Hey, I think something weird is going on with the bank. Maybe there's a security issue? The second one had more tension. Can you call me? This might be a glitch. We can sort it out. The third, I need to talk to you immediately. This isn't funny. The fourth, you're making a mistake. I saved that one. Played it twice. Not out of pleasure, just confirmation. That she finally understood this wasn't a conversation. It was a consequence. She thought I'd fight to keep her. Thought I'd beg, grovel, shatter. But she didn't see the shift. Didn't notice that her betrayal hadn't broken me. It had recalibrated me. You don't beg someone who set your house on fire. You hand them the ashes and send the invoice. I got a text later that night. One line. Why are you doing this? I didn't reply, because if she couldn't answer that question for herself, she was already too far behind to catch up. Ryan walked into the glass-walled boardroom with the swagger of a man who still thought charm could fix things. Pressed shirt, fresh haircut, leather laptop bag slung like a trophy. His smile flickered the moment he saw who was already seated. Julia, not standing, not pacing, seated, calm, centered, poised like she was there for a quarterly update, not the demolition of his career. The room was full, 8 seats around the oval table, all occupied by silent investors and founding partners. These were not emotional people. They weren't here for drama. They were here because numbers had stopped lining up. And someone whispered the words, compliance risk. Ryan's greeting was stiff. Julia. No eye contact. She simply nodded. Morning. He tried for small talk. They weren't buying. The lead investor, Monroe, gray hair, glacier stare, cut to it. We've received multiple notices regarding inconsistencies in the quarterly filings. Ryan, can you walk us through ArcLight's financial structure? Ryan cleared his throat, slid his laptop from his bag like a shield. Of course. ArcLight was set up as a third-party consulting entity to streamline. Julia tapped a folder resting in front of her. This one. He blinked. Yes, I believe so. She pushed the folder to Monroe, then slid duplicates to the rest of the table. 8 identical files, each with Ryan's name stamped across the top. Page 4, she said. They opened them in near unison, like a choir trained in bloodless precision. Page 4 was a forensic audit. ArcLight wasn't just a consulting entity. It was a funnel, a laundering spigot disguised as a business, quietly rerouting funds from legitimate fitness equipment contracts into undisclosed personal accounts. Properties, travel, wellness retreats, a digital ad campaign that never launched because it never existed, and tucked neatly into the appendix. Proof of double billing. Vendor invoices issued twice under different names. The second going directly to ArcLight. Ryan's throat moved, but no sound came out. Monroe glanced up. Where did this come from? Julia clasped her hands. An anonymous tip began the inquiry. I followed the threads. Collected documentation. Had a third-party auditor verify. One of the junior investors, a young guy from Seattle, stared at the highlighted line that showed a wire transfer to Stillwater Yoga, LLC. He looked up. This is Adam's wife's business? Julia didn't blink. Ex-wife. Soon. Ryan finally found his voice. This isn't what it looks like. Some of these payments were miscategorized. That doesn't mean fraud. You filed them under R&D, Julia said, ice in her tone. Your girlfriend's chakra candles are not research. A beat of silence. Then, Monroe, still holding the file, asked evenly, Julia, how long have you had this? She glanced at her watch. A subtle gesture. Practiced. Perfect. Long enough. No threat. No anger. Just fact. Ryan's face collapsed an inch further. His fingers tapped the table like they were searching for a rhythm that might save him. But we built this together, he said, voice thinner now. You and me. You can't. I didn't burn it, Julia said, standing slowly. You did. I just lit the exit signs so everyone could see where the fire was. She slid her chair back, tucked her folder under her arm. Monroe turned to the others. I'll recommend a vote of removal, effective immediately. Interim control to Julia. We'll clean house. No one objected. Ryan didn't speak as she walked past him, didn't follow her out. He sat there with the file still open in front of him, watching the wreckage of his illusion being stapled, signed, and redistributed. Because he thought she'd crumble. He thought she'd rage. But Julia didn't fight like him. She didn't throw punches. She buried ledgers. 1 week after the boardroom fallout, a slim, unassuming envelope arrived at my door. No courier. No fanfare. Just regular mail, like it was a dentist reminder or an invitation to a charity I'd stopped pretending to care about. I knew the handwriting immediately. Stephanie always curled her lowercase y's like she was trying to convince the world she hadn't aged. Even her signature performed. Inside was a single-page letter. Plain. Clinical. This document serves as formal submission of uncontested divorce terms. No alimony requested. No financial claims. No ongoing disputes. You may proceed with finalization at your earliest convenience. That was it. No apology. No let's talk. Not even an I'm sorry for everything. Just surrender in Times New Roman. It didn't sting. It didn't burn. It landed like a sigh, like closure that had waited too long to show up, and when it finally did, was too tired to make a speech. But behind that letter, tucked neatly inside the envelope, was something else. A separate card. Thick cardstock. Matte. Julia's handwriting. Real revenge isn't loud. It's legal, surgical, and permanent. Let's both move on free. And smarter. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel it. The finality, the stillness, the exactness of what we'd done. Stephanie thought she could vanish from accountability behind a namaste and a half-baked wellness brand. Ryan thought his charm and tech bro arrogance made him too slippery to catch. Both had built their betrayals like paper palaces. Flimsy, flashy, and doomed the moment someone touched flame to them. And we didn't torch it with rage. We sliced it precisely like surgeons removing rot. They crumbled. And Julia and I? We stepped away. No entanglement. No chaos. No reconciliation. Just exit. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a drink. Nothing strong. Just the bourbon I used to save for important nights. I sat on the back porch, barefoot, watching the last leaves fall from the birch tree she never remembered to water. The air was sharp, crisp, honest, and I realized something. I hadn't smiled in months. Not really. But right then, sitting there with a signed divorce, a note from the most dangerous woman I'd ever met, and the knowledge that I'd taken my life back. Not by force, but by strategy. I smiled. Not because it was over, but because it was correct, clean, permanent, and perfectly quiet.